Hello and welcome to MalMakes. Today I'm painting the Silent Princess from the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This is the full version. If you're interested in the time-lapse, you can click on the card here. Otherwise, let's get started. We just finished playing Breath of the Wild and I really loved it. Memory 9 was probably my favorite one because it was nice to see Zelda so happy, whereas in a lot of them I had seen before that where she wasn't so happy. So it really stuck out to me, and I wanted to paint the bokeh background I had done for the Pikmin 3 painting again, but it was a lot because it's all circles and the entire thing was circles, so I wanted to tone it down and make it a bit more natural on how that would look on something like this with a faraway landscape. So I went back in game and took some screenshots to see exactly how the castle would look from this angle and what you would see around the castle if you were standing on that same field. So I did that, and I started to play around with how I wanted it laid out and how the transitions were going to be and where all of the bokeh lights were going to go. So in the sky where you're going to have that super bright white clouds or bright blue sky where the sun is, those are going to get just a little bit of white circles just so it has that bokeh effect there. And then the calamity cloud swirly around the castle is going to have that too. So that'll get some of those circle lights on top of the blurry castle that I'm going to paint. As I move into the foreground, things are going to get more detailed and in focus, especially the flower, so that I'll just paint that solid with sharp, nice lines, and the same with the grasses here. I want to block everything in first and then work on trying to blur the transitions between those so I don't have those sharp lines. So I'm going to draw it first, paint it once where things are a bit sharper, and then paint it a second time where I work on blending those lines to make them softer. There's a few different stages to this painting. The first one is blocking everything in with solid colors, very harsh defined edges, and then the second phase is when I blur all of the edges, especially the things that are furthest away, and adding in the bokeh. The final phase is going to be adding in the detail right here with the Silent Princess and some of the grass along the base, but I'm not there yet. So after I had everything blocked in, I used gloss glazing liquid with whatever color I was working with to paint in a soft edge for all of the objects here in the background. So the first one I did was the clouds. I mixed some titanium white with the gloss glazing liquid and filled in different areas to bring just a hint of lighter blue into the sky. Once that dried, I could go back in with different shades of white. So this one right here is a little bit more green. I have one right here that's a little bit more blue, and then I worked all the way into pure titanium white, adding in these little circles until I was happy with the effect for the clouds. Because the highlights on the clouds are going to give that bokeh effect because they're going to hit that sunlight so bright they would cause that to happen. The next part that I did was the mountains because that would be the next thing that was furthest away. I mixed in my gray mountain color, my gray blue, with gloss glazing liquid, and then I painted over the edge to soften that. I had to do it a few times with different levels of glazing liquid and that paint because that paint's going to make that more opaque, until I was happy with the effect to have a nice transition between the sky and the mountain. So if I needed more of the blue color, I would mix more of that into my paint and then paint right here. But if the edge was too harsh, I would mix in more gloss glazing liquid and then paint the top edge to soften it up and mix it more into the sky to make it more transparent to sit on top of that. I did the same with the edges of the castle, but I did not blur them as much as the mountains or the clouds because that's going to be closer to us than the things that are further away. So you can see still little details in the castle that make it stand out so you can tell it's the castle. I haven't done these pillars yet here. They get the Guardian kind of color and there's some lights to them, so they do get a little bit of bokeh on them. I'm just leaving those alone for now because they do sit in front of the castle and I wanted that to be done first. Then I mixed up a pinkish purple color and painted in the Calamity Mist for Ganon, and I liked how the mist part turned out. I don't like how I did the bokeh here. I mixed up light pinks and whites to fill in the sparkly highlighty colors through it with that hot pink, and they look good. Like the bokeh itself looks good. I just think I overdid it and put too many. So I can remix up the same colors I was using here with the purple pink mix and just fill in some of these so there's not so many because I think I overdid it on that. But once I finish that, I can go on to working on these pillars, filling them in the color I want them to, softening their edges with the gloss glazing liquid, and they do get a little bit of bokeh with the orangey red lights that they have on them. And then I can start to work my way forward into this grassland finally. I also find that if I use an old paintbrush where all the bristles are splayed out instead of a nice new one like this one, it works a lot better to make the edges soft. So this is a navy blue color I have with some glazing liquid, and I'm just going to paint on the edge of this pillar here. And you can see it's getting just a little bit darker right there, so sometimes I have to do multiple layers just to make this transition soft enough, or adding more of the paint and less glazing liquid because it's too transparent right now. And I'll just keep working on this until I have it soft enough for where I want it to be. Now these ones here in the front are going to be a little less blurry, and then this one back here will be a little bit more blurry. So I'm going to keep comparing all of those, comparing them to the castle and everything else until I'm happy with how they look. Going back and forth with the different brown colors, and then after I have the blurriness done, I can add the little bit of bokeh that's on those pillars. I'm building up all of the different grass layers and making them blurry and blended, but still having some form to them where I have little valleys and little hills to give it some definition. It's not just a flat green shade. I started with that darker green that I had down first, and you can still see some hints of it here and there, but I've been building up lighter and lighter greens on top of that with glazing liquid, just to blend them in softly so I have these highlights. Now my sun is kind of here on the left side, so that's why like the left side of this pillar gets a lighter brown and the right side gets a darker brown. So I'm thinking about how it would hit these different hills and brighten up the very crests of them. And I'm using all of those lighter colors with the glazing liquid to softly blend in lighter greens on top. Once I get into drawing the flower here and doing some of the grass blades, I'll bring in more of this detail and just fade it backwards as I'm working on that, but I want to make sure I have all of this blending blurriness done first, and that'll have to dry really, really well before I start trying to draw the flower here. I drew in the Silent Princess with chalk pastel and it took a few tries to get it right. I was drawing it way too big for how I wanted it to be, so I redrew it 2 times and shrunk it each time until I was happy with the size. Then I took acrylic liquid white paint and did the lines so I knew where they would be, and that allows me to erase any chalk that I have around it. And I just use a damp towel for that. And once it's really, really dry, I can really scrub and get rid of all of this extra chalk, so it's not going to be there distracting me when I'm painting. It also helps me fill in the lines very sharply and making sure that they're exactly where I want them to sit, instead of using a tiny little paintbrush. So I'm going to block this in with some solid colors, and while it's drying, I want to do a little bit more with this hillside. I think it's too plain, and there is stuff on the hillside. There's some rocks, so I started sketching those in, and I want to paint those in and make them look blurry. There's also other flowers in this field, so I think I want to give a hint of them by using different greens. Some of them are blue and white, so I'm going to do a little bit with that and a little bit more bokeh in the hillside, and then I can go back and work on the Silent Princess and do all of the detail and the value to make it look really good. I was using different greens to bring in more bokeh on the ridge of the hill, also on top of the rocks, and some indication of flowers and grass in this area, just because it was way too plain on this hillside. I started to do a little more grass here in front of the Silent Princess and behind it, and I'm going to build more on top once I finish the flower itself, so there's more detail and it's nice and sharp just like the flower will be. Now that I have the flower blocked in with its base colors so I can see what's going on and where things are going to be, and I can touch up some of these areas where the grass got on top of, I'm going to repaint the entire flower so it has all of the detail and the texture and everything I want it to have, so it's not just this splotchy green and white paint through the entire thing. And then, like I said, once that's done, I can go back to working on some of this grass just to cover up a little bit of the base and give this some more detail. So step 2 is done, where I add all of the value and a little bit of texture in this case to finish the flower up. It's mostly looking at things like where the stem is underneath the flower here, where the flower would cast a shadow onto the stem, painting it darker green, and then lighter over here, and then dark as it gets close to the leaf base again down here. The same goes for areas like this, where the light would hit that very edge of the stem for the flower bud, and it would make it a lot brighter than some of the areas around it. Even the white parts of the petals have some value on them. So there's a little bit of blue-gray in areas like the tip of this one here, and then where they get closer to the center of the flower. Step 3 is adding all of the final details, things that make it complete. And in that case, it's the center of the flower, the stamens and pistils that are there in the center of the Silent Princess flower. So I'm going to draw those in first and then paint those in. I've also finished up all of the grass down here. I was using dark greens to build in some of the grass blades, and then I used lighter greens until I had some nice highlights on the edges, and I used some with a glazing liquid just to give it a little bit of shadow on the ground. So the grass is all done, and it's just the center of the flower here I have to finish. And we're done! We have the Silent Princess from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. If you're interested in this piece, you could buy a poster or a phone case, or bid on this original canvas. There's links down below. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find out more at supportmal.com. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of MalMakes, and I'll see you again here for another video game painting.